This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform where creatives can stand out with their online presence. This should make a much better fitting raglan. Maybe we'll have Brat Winter. I myself don't know if this is too scratchy for me to wear. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Knee Knits. My name is Amy and here I talk about all things knitting, and today is podcast episode number 43 where I'll be sharing what I've been working on for the past few weeks. In today's episode we have a few whip updates. I am finishing up my summer knits. I know I've been saying that for the past 3 episodes, but this time we're really close to being done with summer and moving on to fall, so some of my works in progress are definitely more fall, winter, cozy sweater knits. I have some new cast-ons to share and some new yarn to share as well. So thanks for joining me today. Before we get into the content of today's video, I want to take a few moments to thank the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace is a platform where you can build your online presence from the ground up. I use Squarespace to build my new Knee Knits website this year, ne-knits.com, where I post blog articles, I have some digital patterns for sale, and I also have the ability to sell physical products if I want to in the future. With Squarespace Blueprint, it was very simple to pick one of their customized templates and make it personalized to my brand and logo and colors, and precisely drag and drop all the components of my website exactly where I wanted them to be. And with Squarespace's integrated SEO tools, you can show up more often to people who want to see your content. If you're interested in starting your own website, head to squarespace.com/neknits to start a free trial today. Once you're ready to launch your website, use the code NEKNITS to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and now we'll get into the podcast. I have a lot of projects to share, but right before we get into the projects, of course, I do want to start with what I'm wearing today. This is my tee number 1. It's a pattern by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and I knit it out of one strand of Gepard Wild and Soft in the color Glacier, and one strand of Gepard Cashmere Lace in the color New Wild Sky. I finished this earlier in the season and haven't really worn it too much because it is a thicker wool and silk and cashmere t-shirt, but now that the weather is starting to cool down for the season, I think we're sort of entering the time where I can wear tee number 1 more often. So that's what I'm wearing today. I also wanted to give a few updates on some past projects that I shared in previous episodes. I shared my finished Sevilla blouse last episode, but I had shared that I hadn't had a chance to wear it before talking about it in my podcast, so I did want to update you all. It's been a few weeks and I have actually worn this out and about. I did wear it to work one day and I wore it one weekend day, and it's super comfortable. This is a cotton linen blend fabric. There's also some lyocell in there, so it's a very comfortable fabric and it's pretty cooling. I would say when I wore it to the office with office air conditioning, it was a little chilly, nothing dramatic, but there were a few instances where I felt maybe I needed another layer. On the contrary, I did also wear this on a sunny summer day and it was pretty warm. I went on a walk with it for about half an hour and was definitely sweating by the end of it. So I think I've worn this in 2 extremes of weather and would say that it's definitely comfortable and definitely meant for those cooler summer days, earlier fall weather. I think this is definitely going to get a lot of use, but still have positive reviews on the Sevilla blouse. I'm loving the fit, loving the fabric, so just wanted to do a quick update there since I last shared this as a finished object. And I wanted to also share my Èze Basket Bag. This is a pattern by Alexi of Two of Wands. It's a crochet pattern and I made this with Lion Brand 24/7 cotton in the color Hay Bale. This has been finished for a while now and I'm waiting for my handles to come in. I ended up ordering a set of leather brown handles from Etsy that I was just gonna sew on. I decided to do that rather than doing the crochet handles or the crochet straps, and my original order for the handles never arrived. It was kind of an unfortunate online ordering experience. They got returned to sender. I requested a refund from the shop, but I ended up ordering new purse handles, leather ones from a different Etsy shop. Those are on the way to me. Hopefully won't have any issues with that order. So that's the status with this bag. I was hoping to have this finished sooner, but we're just waiting on shipping at this point. So soon I'll be able to share all about this bag and how I use it, how I fill it, and how it looks with the handles, but until then, it still looks the same here. Now we'll get into my works in progress. I have an exciting update on one very long work in progress. So I've been working on the Cumulus Tee O-Neck for a while now. This was a summer knit that I was very excited to work on because I have a Cumulus Tee already, wanted another one. So this is one of those patterns that I've made twice, although this is the Cumulus Tee O-Neck, so it does feature the rounded neckline rather than the V neckline. This is a pattern by Petite Knit if you're not familiar with it. I'm knitting this out of Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in the color Putty. It's a fingering weight knit, so I'm knitting this on 3mm needles to get gauge, so it's taking a very long time, but I've actually reached the point where I am casting off the body, and you can see the sleeves are already done, so this project is really close to being wrapped up. In fact, I'll probably finish it today after I'm done filming, and we'll block it and can share all about it next week. So it is finished with an I-cord bind off, so you can see I just started the I-cord bind off at the bottom. I'm not doing the decreases that are in the pattern for the I-cord bind off. I just didn't want it to have sort of like a bubbling effect from decreasing while doing the I-cord. My I-cord is also tight to begin with, so I think it's going to have like a slight bubbling, or it'll have a slight cinch, which I don't mind, but I didn't want to make it exaggerated by also adding decreases on top of it. I did similarly do that for the sleeve I-cords. I did not do any bind off decreases that are in the pattern, and you can see here that it does cinch in a little bit, and I like it, but I'm not going to add more decreases on top of it. I am making size small for myself, which was the suggested size in the pattern based off of my measurements, and I just barely started on my 4th ball of pure silk. So you can see here where I joined the 4th ball, and I did maybe like 1.5 inches of knitting before binding off. So I'm gonna have like close to a full ball of the pure silk left over. The pattern did recommend to purchase 4 balls for my size, so that's my yarn usage so far on the Cumulus Tee O-Neck. I ended up not making this super cropped. I pretty much knit it to the pattern suggested length, which is 19 inches from the back neck all the way to the bottom. I do want this to be sort of tuckable because it is just like a staple off-white colored t-shirt. I picture this being more of something that I tuck in rather than leave untucked, so I didn't really want it to have that cropped fit that I do make most of my other tops to. That's how it looks so far. It definitely took a long time. This took a lot of focus knitting to finally get to the length that I needed it to be. At 3mm, this project is definitely no joke. I'm glad that I made it. We'll have to maybe wait a whole other year to make another one at this gauge, but I'm excited to have this finished. And this is my last summer knit of the season. I was disciplined this year and did not cast any new summer knits on recently, within the past few weeks. I think it was for the whole month of August. I didn't cast on any new summer knits because I knew that they would not be done, they would probably be on the needles until September and stuff, and I wanted to move into fall knitting. So I'm glad I made that decision because this is my last summer knit and it's going to be finished today, and then I can commit all my attention to my fall knits. So let's get into those fall knits. The next pattern that I've been working on is also a petite knit pattern. This is the Ingrid Sweater. The Ingrid Sweater is an oversized drop shoulder, all over textured sweater. Petite Knit came out with it a few years ago. I feel like it's one of her more popular patterns. I've seen it a lot on social media and on Ravelry, and have just grown to really enjoy how it looks. I think people wear it really well, and I've just slowly been persuaded to make one myself, despite not really loving the pattern when it was very first released. So yeah, this is something that sort of grew on me, and it's been a lot of fun to make. I am knitting this out of one strand of Valley Yarns Northampton. Valley Yarns is the in-house yarn brand by Webbs. If you've ever shopped online from Webbs, they have a ton of stuff. They're located in Western Mass, and I actually picked this up while I was visiting the store one time in person. So this is the color Ocean Heather. It's this beautiful sort of dark teal blue green. It definitely is a good mix of blue and green, and it has the heathered effect, which I really like. I think it adds a lot of dimension to the knit fabric. It's a worsted weight yarn, and this feels really soft. It's a 100% Peruvian wool, non-superwash, and for a 100% wool that's kind of just like a workhorse yarn, I really like how it feels, and I really like how it knits up was super budget friendly, so I'm really happy with this yarn choice so far. I'm knitting mine on 4.5mm needles, and you can see all of the stitch patterning there. It just looks so crisp and it looks really nice. And of course the ribbing always looks kind of weird when it's unblocked, but this is where I'm at with this sweater. I'm past the joining of the underarm here, so now I'm just working in the round, knitting the body, following the charts for the stitch patterns, and it's definitely been a lot of fun. I am planning on modifying this a bit. I'm making the size extra small, which is the smallest size in the pattern. That should give me about 7 inches of positive ease, which is exactly where I want it. I didn't really want it to be like 11 or 12 inches of positive ease. It would have been too much. And I don't want this to be super long. And the pattern, based off of like projects that I've seen, based off of Petite Knits photos, it definitely looks like a long sweater. It's certainly not a cropped, like high-waisted pants length sweater, which is kind of what I want it to be. And because it's charted with a stitch pattern that has like a set amount of rows for each section, I am going to modify it a bit so that each section in the body is just a little bit shorter than what is written in the pattern. So that way overall, the whole sweater is a little bit shorter. I didn't want to knit all of the sections to pattern and then do all of the shortening in the last section of ribbing, because I thought that might end up with something that looks a little bit disproportionate. Some things I haven't really done the math yet for are like how many rows in each stitch section that I will be doing. I do think that for the lattice section, I'm gonna do like either something that's the same length as this or maybe only twice this rather than 3 times it, which I think is how the pattern is written. So that'll definitely get shortened, and you know, things like the moss stitch should be pretty easy to shorten a bit. And I didn't shorten anything for the yoke because I didn't want to mess up how many rows I had knit for the sleeve pickup, since the depth of the yoke determines like how many stitches you can pick up for the sleeve. Didn't really want to mess with that. I could have, but it would have been more math for me when I went to do the sleeve, and I didn't really want to decrease the circumference of the sleeve. So this part right here is all knit to pattern. It is one of those patterns where so far I can't really knit on it mindlessly because I am looking at the charts and I have to think about how many rows I'm knitting. So I haven't really picked this up too much, but I can tell that once I get into the rhythm of the body and once I figure out how many rows I want each stitch section to be, this might go by pretty quickly, which I'm excited for. I have heard a lot about how the sleeve decreases are kind of tricky to knit, so I'm curious to see if that's going to be tricky for me or if it's just something that, you know, I can maybe figure out without too much difficulty. Ingrid Sweater so far. Definitely getting into fall. This is definitely just that perfect, cozy, oversized sweater. I really love the color. I don't see too many Ingrids in dark colors, so I'm excited to sort of be, you know, not following the trend of a beige Ingrid sweater or a gray Ingrid sweater and going for this saturated teal color. So those are all of the projects that you all have seen before. Now we're going to get into some new cast-ons. So my next new cast-on is a pattern by Èze Basket Bag. This is called Paloma. Paloma is a raglan sweater. It's top down and features twisted ribbing details and a twisted rib detail that goes down the entire length of the sleeve. It is sort of oversized and boxy. It's mostly stockinette and it's knit at a DK weight gauge. So for my Paloma, I am using 2 yarns held together. The wool that I'm using is a fingering weight cashmere sock yarn by Sewrella. This is the color Evie, which was gifted to me from their library collection, and this is an 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, and 10% nylon 4-ply fingering weight yarn. Really nice, really soft. It's one of my favorite bases by Sewrella, and I love the 4-ply fingering weight because it is really round and smooth and has great stitch definition. And I'm pairing it with a Knitting for Olive mohair. This is their soft silk mohair in the color petroleum green. So together, I think it's just your quintessential mohair wool pairing. I'm knitting the smallest size for myself, and this has a lot of positive ease written into the pattern. It has about 11 inches of suggested positive ease, and even at the smallest size in the pattern, that's going to give me 11 inches of positive ease. So I know from personal experience, 11 inches of positive ease in a raglan is not my favorite. I knit the October sweater by Petite Knit last year that had that amount of positive ease, and I do love that sweater, but it taught me that that amount of positive ease is like, it's a little bit too much. I prefer maybe like 8 inches of positive ease. So for this one, I was planning on doing a bit of modifying to it to not get that much positive ease. Because it's a raglan, I think it could be pretty simple to just, not knit the raglan increases as many times as the pattern suggests. And that would be how I would modify it for less positive ease for a size that is already the smallest size in the pattern. To meet gauge, I'm knitting this with 4.5mm needles, and here's the progress. You can see on the sleeve the raglan and the ribbing details that go down the sleeve. This is the back, and the fabric is super soft. It's super fluffy and just really cozy feeling, which I love. Now, I actually did a bit of modifying to start off this pattern, and this was because I had read some Ravelry projects on this pattern that said that they didn't really love the neck shaping. So the Paloma does include some short row shaping to raise the back neck. However, according to some reviews that I read, the back neck shaping only goes across the back neck sections, and it might just barely go into the sleeves, or it might not go into the sleeves. I'm not entirely sure, but people were writing that that specific short row shaping makes a weird bulge at the front neckline, and someone had a great link to a Suzanne Winter blog post that explained how when you're raising the back neck of a raglan, if you want to get a really good smooth fit all around, you need to have shaping that goes all the way down into about 1/3 of the front of the neck on either side. If you just do shaping at the very back, it's gonna create the weird bulge that I think people were referring to online. And when I say weird bulge, I mean mine doesn't have it, but I think it would just sort of bubble up like this when it was being worn. So based off of the blog post, they were writing that you can modify short rows to make sure that they go all the way into the front neck. I knew that I had done this before with the Petite Knit Monday sweater. The Petite Knit Monday sweater is also a raglan, and it uses German short row shaping, and it does have German short rows that go all the way down to about this point of the front of the neck. I know this is not the Monday sweater that I'm wearing, but I'm just showing you visually where they ended up. So I decided to follow the short row shaping for that pattern onto the Paloma pattern. So I did cast on using the Paloma pattern. I did the neckline a little bit shorter than the pattern wrote because I knew I didn't want a super tall neck. That was just another modification that I did. And once I divided according to the Paloma pattern for the raglan divisions, I then opened up the Monday sweater pattern and then followed those directions for the short row shaping. This was pretty useful. The Monday sweater pattern is written based off of the raglan points. It doesn't use stitch counts for the German short row shaping, so that was super simple to apply it to a different pattern because I didn't need to change the stitch counts in the Monday sweater pattern. I was just following that it said to knit to the first marker and then do this, and then knit to 2 stitches past the next marker and then do that. So that sort of thing made it easy to translate onto the Paloma pattern, and that's what I did to shape the neck. So you can see the German short rows that extend down the front neckline on either side. It should make a much better fitting raglan versus what the Paloma had written in their pattern. So that was kind of like an interesting exercise to complete. I'm glad I was able to do it. It definitely makes me understand like the different shaping that goes on in sweaters a little bit more. It's also why some sweaters, some raglans will do a different kind of neckline increase where you knit flat and you do increases along the front neck flat before you join in the round. That is another way that you can have the shaping that raises the back neck and it goes all the way down into the front neckline and gives you an overall better fit. So once I had finished the short row shaping, I then just continued to knit in a raglan style increase for the rest of the pattern. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting. I have to share that I have to frog this. I know, I just shared all about everything I did, and I have to undo it all. And that's because it was a mistake on my end. I was following the petite knit short row shaping, and then I just sort of went into autopilot with raglans, because I know in a lot of the raglans that I've done before, you do raglan increases on either side of the raglan stitch, and then you do one knit round, and then it's like every other raglan increase and then knit round. I totally didn't realize that the Paloma has not that standard raglan shaping. The Paloma does compound raglan shaping, so the increases on the sleeves and the body are at a different rate. So I was not doing the correct rate according to the Paloma pattern. If I had just read the pattern, I would have figured that out, but I just assumed, and I went into autopilot mode, and now I have all this knitting that was done incorrectly. So could I continue it as is? I could. But I do want to try out how the Paloma shaping works with their compound raglan. I don't just want to make another sweater that I've already made with the standard non-compound raglan increases. So I do think it's best for me to frog all of this and redo it, which is pretty unfortunate and pretty annoying, but it was my mistake. So I'll have to do that. I mean, every now and then a project has to get frogged and restarted, so I'm not that disappointed. It's just part of knitting. And if anything, it is going to give me the opportunity to shorten the neck a little bit. I did mention that I made the neck shorter because I don't want it to be like right up under my chin like this, but I had tried this on since knitting this much, and it still is a little bit tall. I think I have a short neck, and so I do want to make this like a little bit shorter, maybe for more of a mock neck style rather than a full funnel neck. So I'm going to undo it. I'm going to undo a little bit of the collar and then just restart with the German short row shaping, but making sure I'm doing raglan increases according to the Paloma pattern. So look at this now, as it will not be like this next time. Maybe I'll catch up by the next time I film, but I'm not really sure. On to my next project. This is another new cast on, and I cast on the Velvet Mirror Cowl by Andrea Mowry. Pretty hard to see now. It is pretty small and noodly. The Velvet Mirror Cowl is a colorwork cowl. It's knit in the round and it's then sewn together, and you add a little twist to it. I saw this at the Lamb and Kid when I was there in Bainbridge Island for my trip to Flock, and they had a sample and I really wanted to make it. I just really liked how it looked and how it used the color changing Spin Cycle yarn. So I had picked up some Spin Cycle at the Lamb and Kid. So this is my first time casting on with some yarn that I got in Seattle, or my trip to Washington, which is really fun. So this is the Spin Cycle that I got. This is the color Nostalgia, and it's really fun, like the dark purple and a little bit of teal in there, definitely colors that I like. And the Velvet Mirror Cowl is knit with a contrasting color that is suggested to be like a Suri color, which I thought was really fun. I've never done, well, I don't do a lot of color work, and I've never done color work with like Suri. I know that's kind of like a thing that Andrea Mowry likes to do. She likes to incorporate some sort of fluffy yarn with some of her patterns, so I thought that it would be cool to try that rather than do just another twisted wool yarn. And I was actually able to stash dive for this, which is awesome because one of my weaknesses, I'm not really good at like stash diving for projects, but I have this leftover Birch Suri. This is from Birch and Lily. This is an undyed yarn. It's actually their old base, so they don't sell this specific Suri base anymore. They have a newer one that has more yardage, but this one I had used for my, what was that sweater? It was like the white sweater. I held this with a Woolberry rabbit rump yarn, and oh, I cannot remember the name of that sweater. Oh, the Ollie sweater. It was the Ollie sweater that I made last winter that I held this with a second yarn from Woolberry. So I have this left over, and it's like the perfect amount of yardage that I need for the Velvet Mirror Cowl, which is like so satisfying to know that I can use up all the last bits of this Suri silk alpaca yarn. So the Velvet Mirror Cowl, it's knit in the round and it's color work, and it's just a tube, which makes the color work a little bit simpler, and then you knit the tube and then sew it together. So because you connect the two ends of the tube at the end, you start with a provisional cast on. So I did the crochet provisional cast on with some waste yarn, and then I'm working on this with 4.5mm needles. They're 16-inch circulars, so it's great because I can just work in the round and not have to fiddle with magic loop or DPNs or anything. And I'm just following the chart. I'm trying to see, let's see, can you see the pattern? Yeah, you can sort of see that. So this Suri yarn is very fluffy, and you can see that it really is dominating the purple yarn that I have. Like, a lot of the fuzz is just coming onto the red, but I don't actually mind that because this pattern is cool where it flips the main color and the contrasting color halfway through the cowl. You might not notice it right away in the sample photo, but if I put it up again, you can see that like halfway through it, the main color switches. So even though the Suri is kind of dominating right now in the pattern, it's gonna flip, and then I think that's why the pattern is called Velvet Mirror, because there's like a mirroring effect. So I think that's cool. Right now, there's definitely a lot of fuzz going on, but I do really like the high contrast with the white and the purple, and I'm excited to keep knitting this so I can see the color changing happen with the spin cycle. I'm just barely getting into some of the blue. If you can see that there, yeah, the spin cycle blue is just starting to come out. It had started with just like a pretty solid maroon color, so this will definitely be a fun thing to watch grow. I know at the beginning of a project it's like hard to see the stitch pattern, it's hard to sort of see the fabric come together, but as it's getting longer, I can tell this might be kind of an addicting knit, even though it is color work, which is slow. So I am doing two-handed color work for this, which is a slow process for me. Like I said, I don't do color work very often. I am a left-handed English thrower, so I hold my yarn normally with my left hand and throw it with my left hand to do the color work. I'm doing that with one color, and then the other color I'm holding with my right hand and then knitting that continental style, so that way I can have the two yarns at the same time, and it's just a little bit faster, and it's kind of giving me some practice with continental knitting. Part of me has always wanted to learn continental knitting because I know it's a little bit faster and I know it's a little bit better on your hands, but part of me also doesn't want to go through the learning curve of being slow and having bad tension, and I know I just need to get past that if I want to learn continental. So this is giving me a taste of that, a little bit of practice, and it's definitely a different type of project than what I'm used to. You know, we're not just doing stockinette. This isn't a garment, so this is kind of like a fun, exciting project for me to have in my rotation when I'm not wanting something that might be boring, or maybe I want to just switch it up from my standard projects. So that's my Velvet Mirror Cowl by Andrea Mowry. Next, we'll get into some acquisitions and some upcoming cast-ons. So the first acquisition I will share is this. You might be seeing it in the background while I'm talking this whole time, but Sewrella Yarn just had their Eras collection part 2 pre-order. Unfortunately, by the time you're watching it, it is closed. I feel like I can never get a video out in time with the new yarn before the collection drops, so you're seeing this after the fact, but this is a new base that Sewrella had premiered at Flock, and then they have it for the Taylor Swift Eras collection. This is Suri DK. So this is a 70% Suri alpaca, 23% recycled nylon, and 7% wool yarn. They're 284 yards per 100 grams. And this is in the color Blank Space, which is this really fun sort of green yellow color that's definitely like on trend. It's kind of like the Brat summer color, even though this is clearly not a summer yarn. So maybe we'll have Brat winter. I don't know. This yarn is a very interesting construction. It's a chainette construction, so the nylon is actually a mesh tube, and then the alpaca and the wool fibers are blown into it to create this very fluffy, lightweight, it is round yarn, and there are lots of different yarns that are sort of in this family of yarns. It does remind me a lot of the Originally Lovely fluff that I knit my Berlin scarf out of last year. It's in the same family as like Drops Air, Knit Picks Wonder Fluff, Lion Brand, Chainette. So if you've used any of those yarns, this is definitely like a similar style yarn. It's got a lot of fluffiness and it has a lot of versatility. It's labeled Suri DK, but it really knits up best, I think, at like a worsted weight gauge or even a bulky weight gauge. I did get a lot of questions on the gauge for this yarn. So I had made like an experimental gauge swatch where I started at 3.5mm needles at the bottom here. This I got like a 22 stitch per 4-inch gauge, which I think is like a pretty standard DK weight gauge. It might be considered tight for DK. Sometimes DK weight sweaters are more like 21 or 20 stitches per 4 inches. But this here, it's definitely smooth and a little bit fuzzy, but I feel like you don't get the full fluffy effect at the 3.5mm needles. It's also pretty dense. Like, I wouldn't mind wearing this. It would be super warm and cozy, but I don't think the yarn really shines at this needle size. The next needle size I used is 4.5mm needles, which is the suggested yarn or suggested needle size for this yarn. And you can see how the stitches open up a bit. You get a little bit more of that fluffy effect. And I got a 19.5 stitch per 4-inch gauge with the 4.5mm needles. Now, I tend to be a tighter knitter, so you might not get the same gauge that I get at the same needle size. So the top section here, I knit at 5.5mm needles, and I got a 19 stitch gauge per 4 inches. So this is actually where I think the yarn shines the best. You can really see the fluffiness, you can see the color variegation a little bit from the hand dyeing, and the fabric feels pretty flexible, but you can see it's not see-through even though the stitches are farther apart. It's super soft, it's got that fluffy feel, and I would love to knit something at this gauge. So a lot of people had asked me what my project plans are for this yarn. I honestly would love to knit the Broom by Andrea Mowry. That's what Sewrella had the kit as for this yarn. It's knit at this gauge, so I would use 5.5mm needles for Broom, and supposedly I can knit the Broom sweater for my size with just 3 skeins of the Suri DK, so I feel like that's a great value. You get a lot more yardage than your standard DK weight yarn for this, and because it knits at like more of a worsted or a bulky weight gauge, you get even more yardage than if you were buying just like a standard worsted weight yarn. This is definitely a color that's outside of my comfort zone. I've never gravitated towards this kind of color. I think the only reason why I might be gravitating towards it now is because it is kind of like trendy, and I think it'd be fun to do kind of like a trendy color knit, even though I know it's not really my color. It'll be fun. I don't know when I'm gonna cast on the Broom, but I think it'll be an exciting thing to have on my horizon for the future. So that was actually the only acquisition I have to share. The next thing I wanted to share is a new project cast on that I will be casting on shortly. Might even cast it on today. It is Labor Day today, by the way, so no work here for me, and definitely gonna be a day full of knitting and video editing, so why not cast on a new project? This next project I'm casting on is something that I've waited for my whole life, and that is a petite knit pattern that's named after me. Now, I know it's not actually named after me, but Petite Knit released the Amy sweater this past weekend, and I just knew it was something I would really want to make. It is a raglan, and it features this really bulky collar, or a really bulky turtleneck. It has 2x2 ribbed accents, and it does feature the rolled edge that Petite Knit has been using in a lot of her recent pattern releases. And sure, there's nothing really like crazy original about the pattern design, but I just really wanted to knit something that had my name in it, and I do love raglans, and I also really wanted to use the suggested yarn for this pattern. The suggested yarn for the Amy sweater is Pure Gint by Santa's Garn. Pure Gint is something that I've always wanted to try in a garment, and I've had this sweater quantity stash of Pure Gint for a while. Has it been over a year? It's been almost exactly a year since I got this. I purchased this while I was on a trip to Oslo. I got this at Garntopia. That was the yarn store. Love that store. Great store. And this is a Petite Knit color. This is the color Cocoa Nibs, which is this beautiful, super dark, chocolatey brown color that kind of perfectly matches my hair color. And I just really wanted to work with this yarn. I did originally buy it for the Eva cardigan. I have not casted that on yet and figured, well, If I want to make the Amy sweater, I should be responsible and use stash yarn instead of buying more yarn. Now, Peer Gynt is a 100% Norwegian wool. It is more rustic than a merino. It definitely has a little bit of stiffness to it. It's pretty plump. It's a DK weight yarn, but you only get 90 meters per 50 grams. So it's like, it's pretty thick. It's a pretty heavy DK weight, but it's still super lightweight. So I did gauge swatch, and the suggested needle size for the Amy sweater is 4mm needles. I gauge swatched at 4.5mm needles and was able to hit gauge, which I think is 20 stitches per 4 inches. But this is my gauge swatch in the Peer Gynt, and it feels nice. It definitely has that sort of like surface level roughness that if you've touched a rustic wool before, you might be familiar with. It has not any sort of buttery smooth or silky smooth qualities to it. It is thick and it still has a lot of flexibility, which I like. And I'm curious how this is going to wear. I think it pairs really well for the Amy sweater. I really love how crisp the Amy sweater looks, and I think that can be attributed to the Peer Gynt in the pattern. I know a lot of people think Peer Gynt is too scratchy to wear. I myself don't know if this is too scratchy for me to wear, but I did sort of like hold this on my neck for a while, and I tucked it like under my bra strap for a while and walked around with it to see how I'd like the feeling of the fabric on my skin, especially at the most sensitive areas, which usually are like my neck area. And I didn't really have many issues with it, which is exciting because I really want to be able to wear this sweater a lot. So I'm confident that Peer Gynt won't cause me too much difficulty to wear. Of course, I won't really know until the sweater is completed and I wear it around a bit. But I think it's good because this is such like a tall folded turtleneck that if it is itchy, I can just like wear an undershirt that like also is a turtleneck, and it'll probably be my warmest winter knit because this wool is definitely warm. So I'm really excited to cast on the Amy sweater. I'm actually casting this on in tandem with Emily from High Fiber Knits. You might know her from YouTube or from Instagram. We both thought it would be fun to knit a project together, and we both had a lot of interest in the Amy sweater. So if you don't watch her already, definitely tune into her YouTube, and we'll be working on this project kind of at the same time this fall. All right, guys, I have one more section for you all. It's a new section to the podcast. It's about spinning. If you missed my flock episode, you might not know that I purchased a drop spindle. I think I mentioned this in the last podcast. So when I was in Seattle and when I went to La Mercerie on Bainbridge Island, I purchased a drop spindle. This is a Kromsky. And this is all they had for drop spindles. I didn't do any research beforehand. I just bought it when I was there, kind of on a whim, but I kind of knew I was going to get one when I was on the trip. Because, I don't know, spinning has always fascinated me. It always seems like a lot of fun, and I just love people's skeins of handspun. They just look so beautiful, and I kind of want to try it. So I got the drop spindle, and while I was at Flock, I had purchased some fiber to work with, and I spun my first skein of yarn. Here it is. I am so excited to have this. Like, it's so special to me because I made this all by myself, and it's not that smooth, it's not that pretty, it's obviously like extremely bulky, but it's like the very first handspun yarn that I've made like entirely with the drop spindle, and I'm just very excited to have it and to share it. So to back it up a bit, I used this fiber from Blarney Yarn. This is a 100% BFL, and this is kind of where I get into territory where I haven't really learned all the vocabulary yet for spinning. So I think this is roving, and this is in the color Hermione. BFL is supposed to be a good beginner fiber to use because it has a long staple length. I learned from a lot of YouTube. I watched a lot of YouTube for the past few weeks and a lot of blog posts that pulling out like a single thing of fiber will show you the staple length. So this is the BFL staple length. I think I did that right. And I just started trying it out. It definitely was a learning curve, and I definitely still don't really have it down. But I watched, who did I watch? I watched Jillian Eve on YouTube, her beginner drop spindle videos and a few others that I don't remember. I did not get to this very quickly. This took about like 3 weeks to get to. My very first spins on the drop spindle were just trying to figure out what the heck was going on. The hardest part definitely is figuring out what drafting is, and I'm still definitely learning. These were like my very first singles. I don't know which one is actually like my very first, but this is what we're working with for a beginner. So if you've learned spinning before, maybe you can, I'm sure you can relate to this. This is like my first ever like tries at using the drop spindle. There's a lot of variety here. Some stuff is really bulky and some stuff is like really small and super like overspun. There's a lot of fiber that I don't know if I can still use it or not. I probably can, but it's like half twisted and half not twisted, like over here. So I just wanted to share that like I'm a beginner, definitely a beginner, and did not get to this on day 1. This was like week 3. Kind of was like slow at the beginning, and then it just sort of like clicked what should be happening as I'm like pulling on the fiber, and now I just need to work on getting it like thinner. I think thinner is the goal because this obviously made like a very bulky yarn, and I don't really want super bulky yarn in general. Like I tend to knit with DK weight or sport weight or fingering weight. I did learn from a few of you who commented, and thank you if you did, because I definitely don't know what I'm doing and need a lot of research or help or tips, that this is a pretty heavy drop spindle compared to the drop spindles that are on the market, and it has a very wide diameter, and heavier, wider drop spindles I believe are better for thicker yarns, because as it gets heavier, as you add fiber to it, the weight of it would snap very thin singles, and so it'll like force you to spin thicker singles just because of the weight of it. So I might consider getting a smaller drop spindle that's lighter, which should make it a little bit easier to spin thinner. So that's something I might think of. Of course, we're just starting out and already buying more material, but it was like a lot of fun, and it's totally different than knitting. I really like the idea of using different color fiber. Like you can already get down the rabbit hole of buying fiber. I did finish this one, and then I wanted to switch it up, so I dove into the other fiber that I bought at Flock, which is here. This is from Little Fiber Co. This is 100% Corriedale in the color Pavlova. And this I was super excited for because the color is gorgeous. And so this, once I spun with the blue yarn here, this was when it like clicked for me. So I used pretty much all of the 2 ounces of BFL to sort of like learn and test out what was going on with drop spindle spinning. And then once I had maybe like the concept down in my brain, I started spinning with the Corriedale from Little Fiber Co. And I have a second skein of yarn that I made, and here it is. So you might be able to see that there's like a little bit of improvement, that I got a little bit thinner. I definitely got more yarn out of this one, and I only used half of the fiber that I got. So I think this is 2 ounces as well. So like I had a lot of waste with the first try at the 2 ounces of BFL, but 2 ounces of Corriedale here. You can see it's a little bit tighter. The colors are so beautiful, and I'm excited to do more. Like these are going to be museum pieces, like trial number 1, trial number 2, and then they're just going to get, hopefully they're going to get more and more refined and maybe more usable. But I really like it. It's a lot of fun, and so far I enjoyed spinning with the Corriedale more than the BFL, which I don't know if that's because the Corriedale was the second like real attempt and I understood it more. In general, I really liked both fibers. I thought they were pretty like easy to use compared to, I mean, I have nothing to compare it to, but so maybe that's not helpful, but in general, the BFL and Corriedale was a good learning experience for me. I probably should get some cheaper, like not hand-dyed fiber just to practice more, so I don't really feel as like bad like wasting it. Not that this is a waste because I'm learning, but you know, if I'm gonna have unusable skeins and go through a lot of fiber very quickly because I'm just learning, it's probably smart to get something that's like not super expensive. So I'll have to look online to see where I can get some like good quality, maybe not hand-dyed fiber. So if you have any suggestions, let me know because I need help looking for that. And yeah, excited to do more drop spindling. I feel the appeal of it. I can tell it's going to be a part of my future. So if you're also a spinner and excited to see me spin, that's exciting. I'm excited to join you all. If you're not a spinner and you don't really love spinning content, I do plan on like keeping it at the end of the podcast, so that way you can check out early if you want to. You always can. That's why I put chapters in the YouTube video, so you can pick and choose what you want to watch. So yeah, that's my spinning with my trap spindle. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining. A few things you can look forward to from me. I have to film my fall knitting plans video, so that should be coming out shortly. Those are one of my favorite videos to film every year because I can just share all of the patterns that have been like circulating my brain for weeks, months, and I'm excited to share the yarn that I have planned for those. I also have my color analysis video coming out soon. I know I've been teasing you all with how I got my colors professionally analyzed, and I just haven't had the time to put together the video yet, but that should be coming out shortly. And of course, we'll have podcasts to follow and lots more to come. If you don't follow me already on Instagram, you can find me NE_knits, where I post more up-to-date project updates and stories. If you don't subscribe to my channel, I would love for you to subscribe so you can get notified every time I post a new video. And if you are a consistent viewer, thank you for listening every single week. Looking forward to seeing you all in the next video, and until then, bye.